Hello and welcome to the first GenZ4 Deal podcast by Projects in Motion Limited in Malta. The GenZ4 Deal Erasmus Plus project aims to develop a training and capacity building program for young people to actively participate in the development of their local community and environment and encourage young people to think more actively about sustainable development, environmental protection and other green topics. My name is Stefan and I will be talking today to Dr. Brian Restall. Brian is working for the local NGO Malta Regional Development and Dialogue Foundation, and he's an expert in environmental resource management, ecological restoration and community engagement. Thanks for joining us today, Brian.
Thank you for having me here, actually, Steph.
Today we will be talking about barriers to sustainable development and explain our listeners a bit some key concepts on how they can be overcome. As a basic definition, we can say that sustainable development is the process of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It includes economic, social, and environmental dimensions, aiming for a balanced and equitable world. But despite our best intentions, there are significant barriers that stand in the way. Brian, can you give our listeners a few examples of barriers to sustainable development?
Yes, certainly. So there's a number of reasons. One of the most obvious barriers to sustainable development is definitely short-term thinking. We tend to prioritize immediate gains over long-term benefits, and we can see everything from unsustainable consumption patterns to business decisions that prioritize profit today without any consideration of their real environmental and social impact tomorrow. There are a number of reasons why decisions are still taken in the short term. Namely, there's a desire for sure returns, no risk, investor pressure for quicker returns, organizational incentives for short-term goals, and simply because it is human nature to look at quick wins and rewards. These are unfortunately the downsides of capitalism, you could say. It's also essential to shift our mindset away from short-term gains to long-term benefits. We need to think about the consequences of our actions on future generations and our planet, not just on the day-to-day. Let me put it this way, true sustainability is really about delivering a long-term, dedicated approach to what we do, where social, environmental and economic values meet to create shared benefit, basically. A second significant hurdle to sustainable development is typically a lack of awareness about sustainability issues. Many people are simply unaware of the pressing challenges we face, from climate change to biodiversity loss. Without awareness, it's literally very challenging to inspire action, and education and awareness raising are vital, there's no doubt. We must inform, empower and possibly engage with individuals and communities and governments about the urgency of sustainable development, and we need to persist on getting the message through. A third reason as a barrier for sustainable development is definitely also inequality, both within and between countries, which remains a major obstacle. It hinders access to resources and opportunities for many, and basically it perpetuates unsustainable consumption patterns among the privileged few. To overcome this barrier, we must address inequality head-on. This includes implementing fair trade practices, promoting social justice, and also ensuring equitable access to education, healthcare, and resources. Apart from these issues, sometimes political and economic interests also clash with sustainable development goals. So basically, that is another fourth barrier to sustainable development. Industries with a dominant and vested interest in maintaining the status quo seem to resist change, making it difficult to implement sustainable policies and also reaching out at a strong political level. So I think what we really need is strong political will and corporate social responsibility to really align economic interest with sustainable development and less greenwashing. This can only be achieved through regulations, incentives, public pressure, and enforcement of existing regulations.
Do you think technological development could be the key to address barriers in sustainable development, Brian?
In many regions, the lack of adequate technology and infrastructure poses a significant challenge. So access to clean energy, efficient transportation, and sustainable agricultural methods, for instance, can be very limited. So investing in technological and infrastructural improvements, especially in these marginal communities, is crucial for overcoming this barrier. And it creates a lot of opportunities for sustainable development to take root.
It's very interesting. Are there any other barriers that we should be aware of when we're discussing sustainable development?
Yes, for sure. I mean, sustainable development is a very wide subject. So there is definitely what we generally call complacency. I mean, in the context of sustainable development, it refers to a state of contentment or satisfaction, if you like, with the status quo, where individuals, communities, and even societies become apathetic or indifferent toward the need for sustainable practices and changes. The reasons are very varied on why this kind of behavior seems to sort of stick. People become accustomed to existing lifestyles, systems, and practices, even if they are unsustainable. They may resist altering their behaviors or habits, for instance, such as reducing energy consumption, I don't know, adopting eco-friendly technologies or changing dietary choices like reducing meat consumption. But in general, complacent individuals and communities tend to underestimate the urgency of environmental and social issues. They may not fully grasp the severity of problems like climate change, habitat loss, or resource depletion. As a result, they may not see the need for immediate action or may believe that these issues are too distant or abstract to affect them personally. I mean, another problem with complacency is that it often leads to inaction and apathy. People may think that their individual efforts also won't make a difference in the face of global challenges, so they choose not to take action. They choose that without being aware in reality, because the problem is way much bigger than what they can actually achieve on their own. The locus of control is too distant for most people. And this kind of complacency and inaction can be very detrimental, because in reality collective individual actions can have a significant impact when combined on a collective, obviously, but it's difficult to see it as an individual yourself alone. There are a number of other points, but in general, overcoming complacency is essential for advancing in sustainable development, for sure.
So if I understand you correctly, every action, no matter how small, matters. We need to inspire hope and empower people to take meaningful steps towards sustainability. Can you give our listeners a few simple pointers what the basic necessities to overcome the barriers that you mentioned are?
Yes, I can try, but keep in mind that this is a very complex and multifaceted challenge, okay? So when we talk about sustainable development, I'm talking here in generic terms. Obviously, we will eventually need to hone in on specific issues within sustainable development, but I don't think it's an impossible challenge that cannot be overcome. As I mentioned before, it is crucial that we, first of all, educate people about the urgency and significance of sustainability issues. We need to highlight the real-world consequences of inaction and benefits of sustainable choices. I mean, that has to be constantly updated because it is an evolving world as well. We also need to encourage individuals and communities to take small, tangible steps towards sustainability and show them that their actions matter and can contribute to meaningful change. We could also define specific sustainability goals and targets at local, national, and global levels, having clear, smaller objectives that can indeed motivate action and measure progress also at the individual level. This also helps the education element, the participation element helps because it really puts pressure on the politicians. Ultimately, politicians don't tend to listen to individuals but more to collectives and groupings. And they also tend to be able to measure the public sentiment in terms of sustainable development. We should also support research and development of sustainable technologies and practices and trying to make them more accessible and appealing to the public. But these are generic overall terms.
Thank you very much, Brian, for these valuable insights. That brings us to the end of this first podcast episode about barriers to sustainable development and their potential solutions. Thank you for joining us today, and stay tuned for the next episode in which we will focus on the issue of social acceptance of sustainable development projects. Until next time, take care.